King Solomon, son of David, ruler of the United Kingdom of Israel in the 10th century BCE, remains one of the most fascinating thinkers of the ancient world. Not because he was a philosopher in the Greek sense, a systematic reasoner building logical arguments, but because his thought, preserved through the biblical books attributed to him, represents one of the earliest and deepest attempts by a human being to grapple with questions of meaning, happiness, justice, and mortality. Solomon's philosophy is not an abstract system, but lived experience distilled into text, the experience of a man who had everything one could wish for, and who, precisely because of that, could test every human ambition to its furthest limit. According to biblical tradition, Solomon inherited the throne from his father David and ruled during the period of ancient Israel's greatest glory and prosperity. He built the temple in Jerusalem, established trade relations with distant lands, accumulated legendary wealth, and, according to tradition, received from God an extraordinary gift of wisdom, after asking, instead of riches or long life, for the understanding needed to govern his people justly. That story alone contains the seed of his entire philosophy. Wisdom is placed above material wealth. Yet, as we'll see, wisdom itself eventually becomes the object of profound doubt. 3 biblical books are traditionally linked to Solomon, and each reveals a different facet of his thinking. The Book of Proverbs represents his practical, pedagogical philosophy, a collection of aphorisms about how to live sensibly, honestly, and successfully. The Song of Songs celebrates love, desire, and physical beauty through erotic poetry that has puzzled theologians for centuries precisely because of its passionate, non-religious nature. And Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, contains what many consider the darkest and most radical philosophical text in the entire Bible, a meditation on the vanity of all existence that approaches existentialism millennia before that term was invented. To understand the entire philosophy of Solomon, we need to treat these 3 texts as 3 phases or 3 layers of one continuous experience. The practical wisdom of daily life, desire, and love as the meaning of existence, and finally, a doubt that transcends both. Proverbs is, in essence, a handbook for living. Solomon's wisdom here is not abstract metaphysics, but practical ethics grounded in one foundational assumption. The world has a moral order, and that order can be understood and adapted to. The central idea running through the book is that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all knowledge, not a demand for civility, but a claim that something greater than the human ego must be respected for reasoning to be sound. Solomon's practical philosophy in Proverbs is built on several pillars. The first is the distinction between wisdom and folly as the fundamental moral category, not sin against the law, but foolishness against the order of the world, poses the greatest danger to a person. The second pillar is the value of work, thrift, and discipline, visible in well-known images like the ant gathering food for winter, or the capable wife who tirelessly manages her household. The third pillar is caution about speech. Proverbs returns again and again to the power and danger of words, to how language can build or destroy, comfort or wound, and how a wise person watches what they say and when. What's most philosophically interesting in Proverbs is the implicit utilitarianism running through the whole book. Wisdom is recommended not only because it's good in itself, but because it yields concrete fruit: long life, wealth, honor, good relationships. This is a philosophy that believes in a causal link between moral and material success. that righteousness and prosperity go hand in hand. It's an optimistic, almost engineering-like vision of the world. Follow the rules, and things will fall into place.
If Proverbs represents Solomon's reason, the Song of Songs represents his body and heart. This short poetic book, composed of dialogue between lovers describing each other in sensual, almost intoxicating metaphors, stands in sharp contrast to the didactic tone of Proverbs. There's no explicit mention of God in it, no moral lessons, no warnings, just longing, absence, and the reunion of two lovers. The philosophical significance of this book is often underestimated, but it runs deep. The Song of Songs claims, if only implicitly, that physical love and sensual desire are a legitimate, even exalted part of human experience, worthy of celebration just as much as intellectual wisdom or religious devotion. This is a radical statement in the context of the ancient world, where body and spirit were often set in opposition. Solomon, or the tradition that attributes this poetry to him, suggests that love, in all its physical intensity, represents one answer to the question of life's meaning. Not an abstract principle, but a concrete, tangible experience of connection with another human being. Still, even in this book, there's a hint of the impermanence that will dominate Ecclesiastes. Love is described as strong as death, and desire as a flame nothing can quench. Images that, for all their passion, remind us that even the most intense human experience is ultimately fragile, subject to loss, time, and decay. Here we arrive at the heart of Solomon's philosophy. The text many commentators consider the most radical piece of philosophical writing in the entire Hebrew Bible. Ecclesiastes opens with a line that has become almost synonymous with existential pessimism. Everything is vanity, an endless repetition, a wheel turning without any final purpose. The sun rises and sets, rivers flow to the sea, yet the sea never fills. Images of natural cycles the author uses to illustrate the fundamental monotony of existence. The narrator of this book, who identifies himself as Son of David, King in Jerusalem, conducts an experiment that is essentially a philosophical method. He systematically tests every possible source of meaning people normally seek, and systematically rejects each as insufficient. He first tests wisdom and knowledge, and concludes that greater knowledge brings greater sorrow, that the wise man dies just as the fool does, and that the difference between them is soon erased by time. He then tests pleasure, enjoyment, wine, and amusement, and finds that this too is vanity and a chasing after wind. He tests great undertakings, ambitious projects, gardens, houses, and wealth of staggering proportions, and concludes that all of it stays behind him, that he cannot take it with him, and that he doesn't know whether his heir will be wise or foolish with what he built. This is a philosophically crucial position. The narrator doesn't claim wisdom is useless in any absolute sense. On the contrary, he explicitly states that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. His argument is subtler and darker. Wisdom is better, but not even wisdom can save a person from the basic fate awaiting everyone, being forgotten and death. The wise and the foolish share the same end, and that shared end renders all human distinctions, all achievements, every hierarchy of value relative, almost vain. Taken together, Proverbs, the Song of Songs, and Ecclesiastes give us a picture of a philosophy that moves through 3 stages of human experience. The first stage is the youthful optimism of practical wisdom. The world makes sense, the rules work, effort pays off. The second stage is the passionate experience of love and desire. The body and heart offer their own intense form of meaning, independent of reason. The third stage, the most mature and the darkest, is the realization that neither reason nor passion, neither wisdom nor pleasure, neither labor nor legacy can finally defeat mortality and the absurdity of existence. And that, paradoxically, this very realization opens the way toward a more modest but more authentic kind of peace. Accepting the simple gifts of daily life without the illusion that they carry some cosmic justification. This threefold movement, from naive faith in order, through passion, to disillusioned but reconciled acceptance, makes Solomon's philosophy surprisingly modern. Millennia before Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Camus, or Sartre articulated questions of absurdity, mortality, and the search for meaning in a world offering no easy answers. The anonymous authors writing under Solomon's name had already posed the same questions with the same intellectual courage, refusing false comfort, but equally refusing total nihilism.
The reason these texts are still read, quoted and studied isn't only their religious authority, but their psychological truth. Anyone who has gone through a phase of believing that achievement, wealth, or pleasure would bring lasting satisfaction, only to discover that satisfaction quickly fades and demands something new, recognizes in Ecclesiastes a description of their own experience. Anyone who has confronted the question of why good people suffer while bad people go unpunished recognizes their own doubt in Solomon's doubt. And anyone who, after a period of crisis or doubt, has found peace in simple, everyday joys, a good meal, work that feels meaningful, time spent with people they love, recognizes something deeply true about human psychology in Ecclesiastes' conclusion. Solomon's philosophy, then, is not a system of dogma, but a journey from naivety toward wisdom, from wisdom toward doubt, and from doubt toward a modest but real peace. That journey, described nearly 3,000 years ago, remains one of the most searing and honest meditations on what it means to be human in the face of one's own mortality. And that is precisely why his philosophy transcends the boundaries of its religious tradition and speaks to anyone who has ever asked, is all of this, in the end, worth it?